We are just 100 days away from the midterm elections, and new polls show that neither Republican nor Democratic voters are particularly happy about their options for the 2024 presidential race. In a News Nation poll out today, 57% of total voters said Mr. Trump should not run for president. 26% of Republicans want someone else as their nominee. More than 60% of all voters said President Biden shouldn't run for re-election. 30% of Democrats said he should sit out 2024. For more on what voters are thinking, Doug Heye joins us now. He is a Republican strategist and the founder of Douglas Media. Doug, great to have you here. Looking at that polling information, Doug, both of the recent presidential nominees, President Biden and former President Trump, clearly not doing too well. So what does that mean for both parties as they head into November?
It means for November, look, it's all about the economy still, right? And it's about what inflation is at and what families are going through every day in their lives. It's really for those numbers of moving forward from that. What do Democrats do? What do Republicans do? For Democrats, it seems pretty clear that those numbers are absolutely unsustainable for Joe Biden. There will be a Democrat that challenges him, if not more than one, should he decide to run for re-election and not stand down. One of the challenges I think that they face is post-November. As we go into a lame duck session, as you know so well, Robert, from your time in the Capitol, these are really controversial times on the Hill. There's a lot of legislation that they're trying to get through. They're trying to combine appropriations bills, all kinds of things where you need everything to go right. And so I think any Democrat who challenges Biden, in that lame duck session could really gum up those works. And then for Republicans, they've got to figure out what the next step for the party is as well, whether that's going to be Trump or somebody Trump-like.
Doug, you've worked with a lot of Republicans who have run midterm campaigns in the past. If you were advising a Republican Senate candidate or House member right now, and they're watching the Democrats move toward passing legislation on the economy, on climate, yes, it includes different spending components, other areas of legislation, what would you be telling your Republican candidates about how to handle that? And could it give Democrats a little bit of a jolt?
It'll give them a little bit of momentum because they can demonstrate they've done something. There just hasn't been a lot of legislation that's gone through this year. But I tell any Republican candidate, you continue to focus on those same three things that you have been or should have been all year. It starts with inflation, then it's rising crime and the situation at the border. If you hit those three topics and only those three topics, you should do well this November.
But there are other issues out there, Doug. I just spoke with Vice President Kamala Harris. She said democracy is the issue on the ballot this time around. And former President Trump has been at the center of the House Select Committee hearings into January 6th, the attack on the Capitol. And we're also learning in recent days that the DOJ is investigating efforts in Trump's role in trying to overturn the 2020 election. So is there any chance that the DOJ's movement, the congressional probe, could it soften support for Trump and perhaps Republicans with some Republican voters?
It's certainly causing some Republicans to try and step away from Donald Trump very slowly. It's softening his support. I'll tell you, I was in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, the weekend before last. I go there every summer, and I noticed this year that there were demonstrably fewer Trump signs. Now, some of those are flags. Some of those were flags about a guy named Brandon. I think you know what I mean. But there were fewer Trump signs than before. There is a weakening in his support, and it's part of the exhaustion that voters have, even Republican voters, that these hearings have really spoken to and paused. But if you're a Republican, you still don't want that distraction. Donald Trump is a distraction. He's threatening to be another one by potentially announcing a run. Your job is to focus on those issues that have caused Joe Biden's approval rating to really go in the tank, and that starts with inflation.
And Trump's still out there on the campaign trail. Do you expect Republicans to still appear with him when he comes to their state in the coming weeks?
Short of any kind of indictment from DOJ or from the state of Georgia, yes, Donald Trump, he may be a diminished alpha dog, but he is still the alpha dog in the party. And what we've seen in primaries is if Trump endorses you, you get a big boost of attention, you get a big boost of fundraising. It may not get you to 50%, it may only get you to 30%, but in a lot of these multi-candidate races, that's enough. Missouri certainly has a competitive primary happening right now. And while it looks like Eric Greitens, the governor, former governor, is seeing his support slip, if you're either of the other two candidates, you'd love to get the Trump endorsement to get you over that line, no doubt about it.
Doug, you mentioned that Trump could jump in the race. I've covered you for years, talked to you for years when you were at the RNC, working for top congressional Republicans. What's the real chatter behind the scenes among those in power about Trump getting in early. Does it actually freeze the field, or are people saying behind the scenes to you at the high level, it doesn't really matter? DeSantis, Governor Youngkin of Virginia, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, others, former Vice President Mike Pence, they're all still going to run regardless?
Well, the first thing it does is it affects November. Democratic voter enthusiasm is really low right now. Every poll shows it, and those numbers on Joe Biden certainly speak to that. So if you're a Democrat and all of a sudden Donald Trump goes into the fray, both feet forward, that's going to give a boost of enthusiasm to Democrats at a time when Republican congressional and Senate candidates, gubernatorial candidates, don't want it. Congressional leadership on the Republican side is very nervous about this. On the presidential side, moving to 2024, it does put a little bit of a freeze on these Republican candidates to announce. They'll have books come out. They'll visit Iowa and New Hampshire. They'll do those things that candidates do, except announce, at least initially, because they know that the first person who announces is going to be directly in Donald Trump's sight, and he has the good opportunity of taking them out, just given how we've seen him do that systematically to Republicans in 2015 and 2016, and really since then.
Doug Heye, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.